Hi guys, today's going to be our lesson over parallelograms, or sorry, not parallelograms, quadrilaterals. And I'm going to go a little quick because there is quite a bit to cover on this, and I'm just going to kind of talk about them, go through them kind of quickly. But these words that I'm going to highlight right here are just words that you need to have memorized. Okay, so I know a lot of times in math we don't have vocabulary, but these are almost, you could think of them as vocabulary words. So like parallelogram, rhombus, rectangle, square, and trapezoid. You want to know the definitions for them. So let's go over the definitions. So a parallelogram, and notice it has the word parallel. So real quick, what's parallel mean? Parallel is two lines that are the same distance away from each other if you extend them forever and ever. So, like if I have these two lines, if I have this line and I extend it both directions, and I have this line and I extend it both directions, they have to stay the same distance apart the whole time. Okay. So that means they'll never touch, right? So if you think of them extending, they stay the same distance. Okay. So a parallelogram has two pairs of these sides. Okay, or it has two pairs of parallel sides. So any shape that has exactly two pairs of parallel sides, you would call a parallelogram. Okay. Parallelograms also have to have a few other things. So parallelograms also have to have opposite sides are congruent and opposite angles are congruent. So I had to write a little small in here because it's a little bit small. So if you have a shape that has two pairs of parallel sides, so that means two parallel lines and then another set of parallel lines, two pairs, the opposite sides are congruent and the opposite angles are congruent, and you have a parallelogram. So like right here, the dash marks through the sides, if they're matching, then those sides are parallel, or those sides are congruent. So like this side is congruent to, I make the highlighter smaller. This side right here is parallel to this side right here. And then this side right here is parallel to this right here. They're parallel and they're congruent, right? The orange sides are congruent because they have the dash through them. And then the green sides are congruent because they have two dashes. So if the dashes match, you know those sides are congruent. Okay. Our next shape is a rhombus. So a rhombus has to have four congruent sides, meaning all sides are equal. It has to have two pairs of parallel sides, exactly two, not less or more. So the opposite sides are parallel. They'll keep going, they'll never touch. This is kind of a repeat, but all sides are congruent. And then opposite angles are also congruent. So like this is what, I guess it's supposed to say opposite sides are congruent. But all the sides are congruent. And then opposite angles are congruent. So like this angle is congruent to this angle is congruent to that angle. So a square is an example of a rhombus, but not all rhombuses are squares. All right, rectangle. You may know what a rectangle is, but let's just make sure. Rectangle has to have four right angles. So you'll notice a right angle has that little L shape at the angle to tell you it's a right angle, exactly 90 degrees. It has exactly two pairs of parallel sides. So like these two sides are parallel and then these two sides are parallel. They'll never touch. In rectangles, the opposite sides are parallel. Or sorry, congruent. They're parallel too, but congruent want to go there. So your opposite sides are congruent. So what it means by opposite side is like this side, the opposite side would be the other side of the rectangle. And this side, the top side, the opposites over here. All right, so if it follows all four of those, it'll be a rectangle. A square has four congruent sides. It has exactly two pairs of parallel sides, so the sides are parallel. Oh. All right. Sorry. All right. So as we keep going, a square also has four right angles. And just remember, a right angle means the angle is 90 degrees. Exactly 90 degrees. Okay. Trapezoid. Trapezoid looks just a little bit different than these other ones. Trapezoid only has one pair of parallel sides. So for trapezoids, let me get my little highlighter back out. Notice only the top and in this one, only the top and bottom are parallel, right? The side angles, if those continue, if you like kind of keep expanding them, they'll eventually touch because the distance from them is not the same as you move up and down the lines. They kind of get closer or farther apart, which makes them not parallel. Parallel lines, the lines always stay the same distance. All right, and then this trapezoid also has one pair of parallel sides. Every trapezoid will have one pair, and then it has one pair of non-parallel sides. So it still has four different sides. Okay, which, sorry, I didn't even go over that. A quadrilateral, all of these are quadrilaterals, guys. All of them have four sides. So quadrilaterals, there can be a lot of different types of quadrilaterals. So special note, a square is a rhombus, but more specifically, a square. That is always true. Squares are quadrilaterals with four congruent sides. Since rhombuses are quadrilaterals with four congruent sides, squares are by definition also rhombuses. A rhombus is sometimes a square when the rhombus has four right angles, but a rhombus is not always a square. It would have to have four right angles. And then another note, a rhombus, rectangle, and square are all parallelograms, but more specifically the other names. So some of these shapes can fall into multiple categories, which is what we're going to talk about next. All right, so we have a couple graphic organizers to do. Again, I'm going to do this kind of quick because it's a little bit of notes. So we have this graphic organizer. We're just going to fill it in. So we have a quadrilateral is a polygon that has four sides, which we already did when we did polygons, and four angles. So you should know that from your polygon notes. Okay, up at the top of our graphic organizer, as we go down, we're going to get some different types of um, shapes. The first thing we're going to start with is a quadrilateral. So a quadrilateral has four sides and four angles. Okay. So all of these shapes, notice they all fall under the quadrilateral graphic organizer. So all of these shapes we're about to talk about are considered quadrilaterals. Now we kind of split in two different ways. We go to one side over here. This is a special quadrilateral. Well, they're all special, I guess, but this one's a trapezoid, right? Trapezoids only have one pair of parallel sides. So trapezoid, we don't really go any farther down on this graphic organizer. On the other direction, we can go this way. This is a parallelogram. So what makes something a parallelogram? It has to have two pairs of parallel sides. All right. So, and then as you go up, it also has to have what's above it. It has to have four sides, four angles, and two pairs of parallel sides. All right. As we move down even further, so everything underneath this is a parallelogram. So these shapes that we're about to talk about are considered a parallelogram. So this one is a rectangle. Rectangles are parallelograms. They have four right angles. They have to have four right angles, and they have to have four pairs of parallel sides. Or sorry, two pairs of parallel sides. Next, we have a rhombus. So rhombuses have to have four sides of equal length. Those are both parallelograms. All right, and then the very last thing we have is a square. So a square could be a rhombus, is a rectangle, it's a parallelogram, and it's a quadrilateral. So a square, what makes something a square? Well, it has to have four right angles, has to have four sides that are the equal length, all the same length, right? All right. So as you go down your graphic organizer here, notice the they're all what's underneath it. So like quadrilaterals, these are all quadrilaterals underneath the quadrilateral part of the graphic organizer. Once we go over here, everything underneath parallelograms is considered a parallelogram. Everything underneath the rectangle and rhombus is considered a rectangle and rhombus. So squares, all of these, right? Except not a trapezoid because it splits off on its own. All right. So we can do this another way. Quadrilateral can either be, it can be a few different things, right? It could be a parallelogram, or it can be a trapezoid. And then a parallelogram can be a rectangle. It's pretty much the same thing, just rewritten. Or it can be a rhombus. And then a rectangle and rhombuses can be squares. Or squares are rectangles and rhombuses, and they're all parallelograms, and they're all quadrilaterals. All right. And then this one's a little bit different. Trapezoid's going to go over here by itself because a trapezoid is a quadrilateral. And then you have, in this box, you can put parallelograms because everything we're putting in this little square is a parallelogram. Parallelogram. And then parallelograms can be rectangles. Or parallelograms can be rhombuses. And then when you have a overlap of a parallelogram and a rhombus, that gives you a square. So basically just kind of getting familiar with some of these graphic organizers and understanding how to read them and knowing the definition of all these different shapes. All right, that's going to be it for your lesson for today. I know it was a little bit, but hopefully you got everything. Make sure you read everything, and make sure you do your practice now.